energy bills are rising at a historic rate, and there's no end in sight. Talk to enough people and you'll soon realize nearly everyone's shocked at their recent electricity bills. Some studies reveal energy costs have skyrocketed by as high as 60% in as little as 2 years. That's why tens of thousands are installing this magical little device from SavePowerBills.com to help slash their energy bills. This sophisticated gadget stabilizes electrical currents, reduces dirty electricity, and helps protect your appliances and electronics. Simply plug it into your home's wall outlet to help lower energy consumption and ultimately help reduce your power bills every month. Countless 5-star reviews back up the notion that this device is one of the most efficient ways to save money while beating the greedy power companies. But there's more. If you order now, you'll also receive 65% off, fast shipping within the USA, hassle-free returns, and last but not least, a 60-day satisfaction guarantee. Just go to SavePowerBills.com to take advantage of this limited time deal before they sell out. Once again, that's SavePowerBills.com.
So I would fully expect, and we are preparing for, an influx of more agents, more of the very visible public theatrics of the raids, of the harassments, and you got faith leaders here. I would not put it past this administration to target midnight mass services amongst folks going to worship, because that's who they are.
The Tracy, you want to get your house in order?
That is correct.
The director of ICE in Justice for
Renee Good! Renee Good! Renee Good! So what you just witnessed right there was anti-ICE protesters in the city of St. Paul, one of the twin cities with Minneapolis, deciding that they were going to storm a church while it was in service in order to protest the pastor, who allegedly, according to these ICE protesters, and possibly Don Lemon, who was there to document the whole entire thing, a member of ICE. He was actually engaged in deportation operations, and if you believe that, if you actually buy into this premise, you're an absolute idiot, you're a disgusting fool, you're a ridiculous person. But again, this is what we could expect in the state of Minnesota with Governor Tim Walz and all sorts of other Democrats encouraging people to go out and target quote-unquote ICE wherever they seem to find them or wherever they seem to think that they may possibly be, and examine their paperwork in order to determine who they are. Again, the irony of these anti-ICE protests cannot be undersold, but what do we expect from a place that was essentially the epicenter of the Black Lives Matter riots circa 2020? And this is what we're going to talk about today, because this is not the only incident. However, it's one of the most recent and one of the most prominent, and now Don Lemon is afraid of the Department of Justice possibly prosecuting him for essentially leading and or directing this protest into a church that is in service.
Into Minneapolis a little bit ago, and did some reconnaissance on the ground, speaking to an organization there that's gearing up to for resistance and protest. I've been pleasantly surprised to see the community coming together. Diverse community. If you see this, when we first pulled up, we're like, wait a minute, which operation are we at? And as it turns out, because we were like, well, this is kind of MAGA coded, right? Saw the American flag or whatever, but these are resistance protesters. They're planning an operation that we're going to follow them on. I can't tell you exactly what they're doing, but it's called Operation Pull Up. And it's Takima Armstrong, and she has been doing this since George Floyd, Dante Wright, and others, where they surprise people, catch them off guard, and hold them to account. And so that's what we're doing here. And then after we do this operation, you'll see it live. And these operations are surprise operations. Again, can't tell you where they're going.
Which, by the way, had anybody done this to a mosque while it was in service, would obviously be a civil rights violation. If we were under the Biden administration, they would have been prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But if you're a church-going person in this particular instance, you're just going to have to shut up and take it. You're going to have to deal with it, because guess what? Your rights don't matter, because we must preserve and protect the Somalis. And by the way, if you think I'm joking about that, if you think I'm kidding about that, there were people in this particular video confronting churchgoers and the pastor, claiming that they're not doing enough in order to protect the Somalis and maybe down the line the Latinos. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money.
Okay?
It's available in the sides here, the transept. There's a few seats open. There's some seats up here as well. I'm going to read to you from the Gospel of John, chapter 13. I'm going to begin reading.
You said that you asked the Lord to change your house. Tracy, you want to get your house?
That is correct. Yeah. Can I get someone? Yes, ma'am. You're interfering with our worship.
So it's kind of crazy to watch from this particular angle that I'm assuming was recorded via the church live stream, because you could see the pastor going into his little speech thing as normal. You can hear people build up on the outside of said church, but you don't think that these people would have such disregard, such a lack of humanity, such a lack of respect that they would actually storm this house of worship. But that is exactly what happened at this moment in time. And again, this is what is to be expected by these anti-ICE rioters, because they're being encouraged by government officials to think that ICE is not a legitimate form of law enforcement. They're being compared to the Nazis constantly. And when you tell people that there are Nazis afoot that are going after all these different various peoples of color, innocent Bubba angels who are totally not in this country illegally, not committing crimes while in this country illegally, this is the crazed response that you're going to get, especially when your side of the political spectrum often encourages violent rioters against Republican administrations in the White House in order to achieve your political aims. But again, this one is particularly egregious because you have former CNN host Don Lemon out there actually encouraging this, interviewing parishioners, trying to lecture them on morality, as he is the person who raided this church, or actually documented the raiding of this church, again, based on the idea that the pastor may have been a member of ICE or something of the sort.
Renee good! Renee good! Don't shoot! 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 Don't shoot!
I also want to point out the obvious, that these people are chanting hands up, don't shoot, and there's a reason for this. First and foremost, obviously, these are the same exact people from the Black Lives Matter riots. These are the same exact people who tore up Minneapolis and St. Paul back in 2020. They were not prosecuted. They were not punished for their actions. So, of course, emboldened by the idea that they were allowed to get away with it, and in fact, in many municipalities, they were actually paid to do this after the fact. We talked about this in New York City. We talked about this in Philadelphia, and I'm sure the same exact thing happened in Minneapolis and St. Paul, but also they're chanting hands up, don't shoot at this particular church, which again just goes to show you how absurd the media actually is, because this comes from the Michael Brown shooting in 2024, even though again we've had multiple investigations into that shooting. Officer Darren Wilson acted wholly in defense of himself. Michael Brown was 100% in the wrong. He went for Darren Wilson's gun. He ended up charging him. And of course, and this is absolutely crucial, the idea that Michael Brown put his hands up is an absolute ridiculous lie, as we've documented and proven time and time again via the forensic evidence, via multiple witnesses. And yet it is still being repeated. 12 years later, in 2026, we're still hearing about the myth of Michael Brown, and this time it is invading a house of worship. And again, I will remind you that all these different people in left-wing media, in the Democratic Party, are encouraging this exact type of behavior. And by the way, because the police are not allowed to work with ICE, they're not allowed to coordinate them, because of course St. Paul is a sanctuary city, Minnesota is a sanctuary state, you as a regular ordinary citizen have to fight off these ICE protesters on your own, or let them take over your church, as is what happened in this particular case, because the police have designated them to be above the law. This is the absolute absurdity of our modern era, and I will remind you that the whole reason that that ICE agents have surged to Minnesota in particular, or sanctuary cities across the country, is due to the fact that these sanctuary cities and states refuse to turn over the serious criminals to federal agents upon arrest. So essentially, in order to protect the criminals among illegal alien populations, you have a situation where you can't even go to your house of worship unaccosted by these left-wing rioters.
Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are your people? Why are you not at Whipple every day fighting for the humanity, standing for our people? Where are you? You drink your coffee, you got your jewelry, you have your nice clothes.
So again, of course, you see them screaming at the pastor right there. You have them labeling the pastor ICE prior to invading this house of worship. He is calling shame on them. And then they start targeting everyday random parishioners at this particular church, including this very attractive young woman who is sitting on her coffee. And then, of course, they confront this guy who honestly, again, even though he did nothing wrong, and I don't need to throw shade at him in any way, shape, or form, kind of looks like a vampire and possibly also should not be in this church because vampires are forbidden from entering the house of worship. But the thing is, a vampire is more respected in this situation than these left-wing rioters. And of course, what we hear, this is all about the people that need to be defended are the Somalis.
But what do you do? What do you do to stand for your Somali and Latino communities? I'm not going to comment. You have no comment. Exactly.
So what we're seeing right here is probably best described as Stockholm Syndrome, as you have all these different various people that are very upset about the fact that the Somali community is getting a bunch of attention. By the way, the reason they're getting so much attention is because there is a disproportionately high amount of government fraud among the Somali community. They set up all these different things like daycare centers. You have situations where they're stealing money meant to feed children. You have the Medicaid fraud and all sorts of other things. And these people have been ginned up in a hysteria in response to Nick Shirley exposing this. So now they're going into random churches and demanding that the parishioners of said church go out and protest on behalf of the Somalis, submit to their Muslim conquerors, which, by the way, again, is another absurdity on top of all this. In addition to that, you have them talking about the Latinos. Now, of course, St. Paul is about 10% Latino. I don't know if these people are disproportionately immigrants, let alone disproportionately illegal aliens. There's a lot of Latinos in the United States of America that don't have immigration issues at all whatsoever. But of course, the logic doesn't really matter for these left-wingers. They are here to stir up chaos, and they are here to sow terror, and they want you to know that if you are even perceived to be possibly, potentially affiliated or friendly to ICE agents, if you are somebody who wanted the law enforced on a federal government level, then guess what? You are in fact a target, because these people don't believe in our electoral system. They don't believe in the fact that they lost the election hugely based on this particular issue, as Kamala Harris was the border czar who let a bunch of people into this nation. Trump ran on very much enforcing immigration laws, so they have decided to raid this church, teach these people a lesson, and again, scream and act all sorts of crazy, again, while Don Lemon is there, sticking a microphone in the faces of random individuals.
I don't necessarily agree with everything that's going on in the Twin Cities right now, but I don't think it's good to fight fire with fire.
Energy bills are rising at a historic rate, and there's no end in sight. That's why tens of thousands are using this amazing little device from SavePowerBills.com. It's a small but smart gadget that stabilizes electrical currents, reduces dirty electricity, and helps protect your electronics. Just plug it into your home's wall outlet to help lower energy consumption and ultimately help reduce your power bills every month. Order now to get 65% off plus many free bonuses before they sell out by going to SavePowerBills.com. That's SavePowerBills.com. Order now.
I think it's good to speak up. I think it's good to protest, but I think it's better to do it in a peaceful way. I don't think the answer is going into God's church.
You don't think this is peaceful?
Well, it's trespassing.
Nobody fighting.
It's trespassing. How would you feel if I went to your house and I started yelling?
It depends on what I did, but not in my house. That's a whole different thing. I think these people would go inside of anybody's house.
This is a house of God.
Which makes it everybody's house.
Yes, it is. But in a house, people don't yell at each other.
Yeah. There's a lot of yelling in my house growing up. We still love each other.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean that yelling is the answer, right? Sorry? That doesn't necessarily mean yelling is the answer, right?
No, but I think it's the way you work things out is that you talk to each other, you disagree. Sometimes it's heated, sometimes it's not.
Now look, I don't know the political affiliation of the people at this particular church. I know that the left-wing agitators seem to believe that the pastor is ICE affiliated, which means almost certainly that that is in fact false, made up, and ridiculous. But the idea that you're going to be so friendly and so polite to people who show you no respect at all whatsoever, that you're actually going to answer questions with the microphone in front of your face is absurd and ridiculous. This pastor should have not tolerated Don Lemon for a second. He should have thrown him out on his ass, which is what CNN did and where Don Lemon deserves to be. But not only did this pastor actually take an interview or at least answer some questions with Don Lemon as these rioters were showing up, getting in his face and screaming at him, but you also had other parishioners do interviews, including like a 4-minute long interview, which of course Don Lemon took as an opportunity to lecture this guy who again was concerned about people showing up to their house of worship in order to terrorize them.
These people have come into our house and they've interrupted our worship. This is a house of peace, and we try to proclaim that. And this stirs division and rancor. And in the end, it's not helpful. Ultimately, I believe they've lost. They've emptied a house of worship. Everybody's gone home. Their point has been proven worthless. And so, in the end, I think they lose. But more importantly, if I was to break into any of their houses uninvited, cause derision and upset according to their values, I would be kicked out ultimately. It's not a good way. I feel violated. I feel interrupted. I feel angry.
So, of course, this guy gives a very reasonable take on what is currently happening at this moment. It is driving the people at this church away. By the way, it is good for them to leave for safety issues because, as we know, these left-wing quote-unquote protesters get violent very quickly. They attack random people. They absolutely are emboldened by members of the state. Again, Tim Walz was talking about how, oh my God, the ICE agents are going door to door demanding you snitch on your people of color neighbors. Again, the Nazi comparisons coming repeatedly from the Walz administration, who is desperately looking for a distraction from all the fraud that he allowed in his state, which, by the way, was so bad. And when it was picked up by the media post Nick Shirley, it actually caused Tim Walz to forget about running for a third term. But of course, Walz might still want to run for president, so he's betting on the idea that if he could gin up enough anti-ICE hysteria in Minnesota, he can pitch himself as the resistance candidate when he runs again, and hopefully he doesn't get questioned all that much on the Somali fraud that he allowed in his state, very much like he wasn't questioned on it when he was on the VB ticket for Kamala Harris.
Saying if you had showed up at their house, they're saying that people are showing up at houses where they're citizens without due process and breaking and entering, and how one that we saw, I've been watching from New York, with a battering ram into someone's private property, and there's no recourse.
So in addition to all of this craziness, you also have Don Lemon going on social media saying that he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't know it was going to be like this. He was there as a member of the media.
MAGA administration and the fake news MAGAs are losing their mind over something that's not even true. So let me just make it clear, because this assistant attorney general, I don't know, what's his name? Something Hammett, Dillon or whatever. So, I had no affiliation to that organization. I didn't even know they were going to this church until we followed them there. We were there chronicling protests. Once the protest started in the church, we did an act of journalism, which was report on it and talk to the people who were involved, which included the pastor, members of the church, and members of the organization.
Look, I know a lot of people hate Don Lemon, and by the way, deservedly so. He is one of the worst people in the mainstream media, and now he's in independent media, and he's flailing around like an absolute idiot ever since he got to independent media. I do want to say that there is something to the fact that he is operating as a member of the media. He is documenting this particular incident, and therefore the calls for him to be prosecuted for his his role in this are not to be heeded all that seriously. In addition to that, I also want to point out that it's important to not make Don Lemon the victim in this particular scenario, because even if he knew about this, even if he was aware that this was going on, him showing up to cover it does not necessarily make him criminally liable. That being said, the left-wing agitators who showed up, stormed this church, disrupted the service, they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, because again, they are operating in bad faith. They don't have the media excuse. They're terrorizing random individuals. And by the way, Governor Tim Walz, who's busy calling ICE agents Nazis for daring to enforce immigration law, which by the way, Donald Trump was elected to do. And by the way, the funding for ICE was passed into law with the big beautiful bill, so it's all squared away and legal, should probably focus on these left-wing rioters that are antagonizing regular ordinary individuals in his state, rather than make up fantasies about how they're actually fighting against the evil Nazis. Because we talked about this before, where they ended up stopping a rental car that they assumed was being piloted by an ICE agent. They ended up harassing the individual who was in this car.
Here you go. There, like I said, I don't have to do this. I'm happy to do this. That's all. We just got to stop this.
So he's got a lot of camera equipment. I think we can say this isn't.
Yeah, I'm not. I tried to tell the First Lady, nobody believed me. That's all I can do is tell you. I already shot. Listen, first of all, I don't have to do any of that, but I'm kind. I respected the argument. Yeah, no. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I just don't understand my job. I don't know how to do it.
And of course, after they found out that he was completely innocent of the crime of being a member of federal law enforcement, you ended up in a situation where they were lecturing this guy on daring to drive a rental SUV in the city because he doesn't understand what's going on right now at this moment in time, and he ought to be ashamed of himself.
Were you here yesterday?
Yeah.
Yes, he was here yesterday. I can testify that. I didn't recognize him.
No, I appreciate your help. Thank you.
I'm not here to help you.
No,
I think the fact that you're in a vehicle like this at this
I
time
get it. But with all due respect to everybody, I can't help what I drive.
Well, you can. You go rent something else.
Well,
I mean, if you're part of the media.
That's not how it works.
This is my business.
I know. This is not how it works. So, hey, I hope you guys understand. Not here.
He was here with a video camera yesterday. I did see another vehicle with them. But
he showed
I did see him with the camera.
Press badge when company on the side?
No. Okay. I told him I was with the media.
Okay.
And when people get irate with me, I have no choice to just go out the window.
I think you got to understand that people were
Well, it wasn't yesterday, because that's what we did the story on.
Sorry.
Let's just wrap this up, okay?
Helpful. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's fine.
You guys the first time.
Let's just wrap this up.
Now look, I understand that the left-wing activist class is essentially made up of a bunch of unemployed members of the Horde. These are a bunch of trust fund brats that are absolutely entitled to act out in all sorts of crazy ways. But the reason this guy rented a car, which by the way is none of your business, it's not something that you get to judge and you get to decide on because this is the United States of America, is because he's doing a thing that's called working. He actually has a job. He needs that vehicle in order to perform his job. And even if he was renting it for pleasure, like a vacation or something of the sort, while he definitely shouldn't pick the state of Minnesota because it's a lawless hellhole, obviously he is permitted to do so. He has every right to do so, and you just need to shut the hell up. But again, this was not the only instance of something like this happening. There was an incident where people were at a restaurant dining, and apparently the owner of said restaurant labeled these people members of ICE, ended up putting in a tip on a private signal chat, and people ended up showing up to terrorize those individuals.
This is so cool. So cool as in like this has got to be the funniest thing I've ever seen. I know, it's like you feel like a zoo. I've never.
Then why do you care? You just bitch. I'm just trying to enjoy my lunch. If you're not with us, then you're against us. So clear.
Hi.
So clear.
Oh my god. What? We do custom apps for a whole bunch of companies around Minnesota and the country. Filming us?
Why are you filming us?
Because you're filming us. Here. You want to
So obviously this is a disaster. It is a brewing powder keg, and when it goes off, when it ends up becoming a bigger problem in the city of Minneapolis or St. Paul or anywhere in the state of Minnesota or in any of these left-wing jurisdictions, you're going to have all of these politicians blame ICE, even though, again, these are the people that are stoking the flames of violence. They're whipping up their left-wing mobs into hysteria, and of course, they're targeting random individuals. Again, what they're hoping for is another Kyle Rittenhouse-style incident so they can go after a random person, even though that was a perfect case of self-defense. They don't give a damn about the facts. What they want is more perceived victims, because look at how much traction they're getting out of the current victims and, of course, the past victims, even though they are not actually victims. Again, they're still chanting, hands up, don't shoot, which is absolutely insane and ridiculous because it wasn't true in Michael Brown, but in any of the shootings that they're angry about, the Renee Good shooting or, of course, the shooting of the Venezuelan illegal alien, they were not hands up surrendering. They were actively antagonizing, posing an imminent threat, and this is the reason for the escalation. But again, the Democratic Party is all about this escalation. They want you to have the perception of chaos under the Trump administration, and hopefully this stops. Hopefully everybody goes back to normal and they start living their lives and nobody gets hurt. But assuming that doesn't happen, hopefully this backfires on the left wing and they suffer dramatically for, again, stoking the flames of violence just like they did during the Black Lives Matter riots when it's wholly unjustified. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the absolute madness in Minneapolis. Till next time.